Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to meet the candidates tonight. On behalf of the elementary parent-teacher organizations, we have invited the 4 candidates for the 2 Board of Education seats to attend and answer questions that have been previously written by the PTO presidents and questions by the audience. As you may or may not know, there are 2 items on the ballot this coming Monday. The first item is the election of 2 Board of Education members. The second item, voters in the Hazlet School District will be asked to continue the 18 mills non-homestead assessment for the school's operating budget. And before we begin this evening, I've asked our school finance director, David Martell, to briefly explain that proposal. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. Briefly, we'd just like to bring it to everyone's attention and to remind you that there is another item on the ballot on June 14th, and it is the renewal of our non-homestead mills. And as a reminder, that's the millage that's on only businesses and second homes. So it really doesn't affect primary homeowners, which the bulk of us are primary homeowners. But it is a part of the Proposal A that got passed back in 1994, and for each district to get our base foundation allowance that we're guaranteed from the state of Michigan, we have to levy 18 mills on our properties that are businesses and second homes. There is a thing called a Headley Amendment that happened a while back, and that amendment to the Constitution reduces the amounts that districts can levy over time. And very simply what happens is, even though a district like ours, who is getting no increase from the state of Michigan on our foundation allowance, the Headley Amendment somehow figures that we're getting too much of an increase. So what has happened over time is that we've come back to the voters, and the last time this happened was in 1998, to ask for a Headley override of the millage that has been reduced over time. This time, we have just gotten the information from the assessor's offices, and it looks like that we'll have a shortfall of about 0.8 mills, which is about $85,000 to the district. And simply what we're going to be, what this question does is it asks the voters of the district to override that Headley reduction and allow the district to maintain our full foundation allowance, which was what was intended with Proposal A. Really, that what's happening is that over time, well, I won't repeat that. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience or anything, but it's just an additional item that is going to be on the ballot this time.
Okay.
A clarification, Mr. Regan.
Not a clarification, a question. So it doesn't impact the homeowners of Hazlet?
That's correct. The homeowners, it's really on only businesses and second homes, and so the homeowners will actually see no increase in their taxes at all. And for businesses, there's really no increase either. It's a continuation of the mills that have been there since 1994.
If this doesn't pass, what would happen?
Like I said, the reduction that we would see in our foundation allowance would be about $80,000. And so the district this coming year, as we start our year and we're passing a budget this month for next year, when we do a budget update, we'll have to somehow take into account that we'll have $80,000 less. Good question.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt.
Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our 3 PTO presidents that are with us tonight. Melissa Mays from Wilkshire is going to be keeping the stopwatch so we can keep the candidates on track and make sure everybody gets equal time. Chris Cody is at the table. She will be one of the presidents. She's the Murphy PTO president asking questions, and Millie Hines, the Ralia PTO president, will also be asking questions. If anybody, there you go. Well deserved. If anyone in the audience would like to submit a question, there are yellow index cards and pens over on the side. feel free to do that, and then you can walk right behind the camera, bring the question up and hand it to one of the ladies, and they'll see to it that we can get them asked. The format is each candidate will get 2 minutes for an opening statement, and then they have been given 3 questions in advance to prepare answers to, and from after the opening statements, they'll be given 1 minute for each of the questions. After the 3 prepared questions, we'll go to questions from the audience or from the general pool. And we will alternate who gets to answer each of the questions first and last, and it's been agreed that David Turner will begin with his opening statement.
Thanks, Bob. As Bob said, I'm David Turner. I've been a Hazlet resident for a little over 9 years. I live with my wife, Megan, who's a teacher in Lansing. We have 3 young children. We have a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. Right now, I'm employed by Tommy Raines, JMAC Real Estate. I'm a realtor. Prior to that, I worked in the public sector with the Michigan Department of State Police as a budget director for the division, as well as a manager. My educational background includes a bachelor's degree in finance and an MBA. In addition to that, I completed the Educational Policy Fellowship Program through MSU about 3 years ago. One of the questions was the reason why we're running. Basically, I have no set agenda or specific problems with the district. I just want, just looking to serve the community. And I look at it as an investment for the future of my kids that are coming through the district soon. In terms of why I'm qualified, I feel like that my background in finance and budgeting will be quite an asset to the board, since this is going to be a big issue in the coming years and as it is right now. Also, obviously my wife being a teacher, I think gives me a unique perspective on what the teachers do on a day-to-day basis. And basically it's a willingness to serve the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Next will be Bev Levy.
Thank you. Let's see, I've lived in the community for about 23 years. My husband Chuck and I are I think our 4th house in Hazlet, and our son recently bought a house in Hazlet also. So we're very firmly entrenched here in the community. I've been on the school board now for 12 years, so I'm running for re-election. I'm a past president of the school board. I'm currently the secretary and chairman of the Policy and Personnel Committee, and have held, I think, every office on the board. I'm very interested in running for re-election because I've really enjoyed my time on the board. I think that I have had some impact and board decision-making that has been positive over the years. Prior to staying home as a full-time homemaker, I worked for over 20 years in the insurance business and was manager of several departments, underwriting and administrative services for Meridian Insurance, and also had experience with budgets and people management. So I think that that's been something that's been real helpful for me. I've also been a parent of 2 children that have both graduated from the Hazlet school system. They've gone all the way through, and it gives me some additional experience having been a mom who was both at times a working mother, trying to do everything at once, and a stay-at-home mom, having lots of time to go into school and help out and do all kinds of things. And I think that will definitely help me if I'm allowed to have another 4 years on the school board. Looking forward, we have a superintendent leaving, hiring a new one. We have a finance director just hired, and at least one more school board member coming onto the board, and I think that my experience would be helpful if I stay on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. Next will be David Hamilton.
I'd welcome the opportunity to serve as your representative on the Hazlet School Board. I have the experience and the commitment to be an effective board member. I've lived in the Lansing area for over 30 years. 13 years ago, we built our home here in Hazlet, choosing it largely because of the school system. Since our oldest daughter began school in Hazlet 11 years ago, I've been very involved in the PTOs in Wilkshire, Raleigh, and the middle school. I've also been active for the same period of time in the Hazlet Coordinating Council. That's a district-wide committee that is made up of the administrators from each building, a parent from each building, and a teacher from each building. A lot of the important policy and program issues of the district go through that committee. I've also been active in the local church as a deacon, a Sunday school teacher, and as a small group leader. I've worked for the state of Michigan for 26 years, 20 of which I've been a supervisor and a manager. I've run a division that's actually almost the size of the Hazlet school system with over 200 professionals and a budget of over $20 million per year. I've dealt with boards and commissions both at the state level. I've worked for a commission and at the local level. I'm the father of 5 children. Our oldest is almost through the entire system. She'll be a junior next year. And next year we'll have children in 4 of the 5 schools, one in middle school in Raleigh and in Wilkshire. So I have the experience of one that's been almost all through the system and also one that hasn't even started yet. So I've got the perspective of the full range of parental experience here in Hazlet at one time. And what I'd like to bring to the Hazlet School Board is my experience as a parent, as an involved parent, and as a manager. That I'd like to see the academic program remain strong and the extracurricular program very enriching. And I'd like to see parents involved more and interpret their, or see them more involved in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Rob Fowler.
Thank you, Bob. I'm Rob Fowler. I am married to Lisa Fowler, who some of you will know is a very active volunteer around the schools. I have a son, Reed, who's 9 years old at Raleigh, and a daughter, Emma, who is 7 at Raleigh. I'm currently the president and CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan. I have about 15 years worth of experience working for chambers of commerce, both in Cleveland, Ohio, and in Indianapolis, a statewide chamber. I think I have maybe 6 experiences that I could draw from that I think would help, that would contribute to the board. And maybe as a way of saying how I'm qualified, let me give you those 6 experiences. I have a background in community development, and I'm a homeowner. And I understand the relationship between community development and the quality of our education system, and that those two are completely linked, and that a community doesn't really succeed without a quality education system. And even those people who may not have kids in the school system, who think they don't have a stake, do. And I am keenly aware of that. Secondly, I've been a volunteer. I've chaired the safety committee at Wilkshire of the PTO, and I've chaired the safety committee at Raleigh of the PTO. I've been an active volunteer through the PTOs, a little bit in the classroom through junior achievement, while not in this school system. In a different school system, I've taught 2nd grade junior achievement. Third, I've been involved in public policy, state legislation, for most of my career. And as a result, I have an understanding of how policy making works and the process of policy making. And I also have a kind of a natural instinct to pay attention to issues. Fourth, I'm the president of an organization. I understand things like managing people and budgets and setting direction. Fifth, I'm with an association, and the association itself has a board of directors of 25, and I understand the roles of the staff and the role of the association. And finally, I'm a father, and I'm not sure that it qualifies me any more than anybody else sitting at this table, but it certainly is the reason I am running for school board.
Thank you. For the first question for all candidates,
First question. What are the important issues facing the Hazlet schools in the next few years? And where do we need to focus our attention?
a reminder, these are 1-minute responses. Bev?
Thank you. I think the most important issues facing Hazlet schools in the next few years are, of course, finances. But number one for this upcoming year, it will be bringing on all the new people in the administration and on the school board and getting them used to the way the culture works and how we do things in Hazlet. That will be, I think, very important initially in the first year. Finances, of course, everybody reads the paper, listens to the news. We've all heard that schools are taking a lot of hits. And it's kind of interesting from my perspective, because when I first came on the school board 12 years ago, one of the things that I wanted to be involved in was I knew that we were going to have budget cuts and that the schools were being hit financially. And that I wanted to be involved in that as a parent. So it seems to be kind of a cycle that we go through. We're doing it now. We've had feast and famine, and it's just part of the school situation.
Thank you. Dave Hamilton.
think there are three major issues that the school will be dealing with. A is accountability. How do we measure the effectiveness of the school system? B is budget. And we're now tied to the state cycle of budget, which unfortunately has good times and bad times. And C is competition. With schools of choice, public academies, and neighboring districts with declining enrollment, there's going to be a lot of competition for students. Parents are no longer tied by geography, so they have options as to where they'll put their children. And the children here are going to be because the parents want their children here. The things I think we need to focus on to deal with this, we need to contain cost without compromising quality. We need even stronger partnerships with parents and teachers. It's through that kind of partnership that we can grow our support and come up with innovative ideas. We need to teach our core programs very well and have a very strong foundation. Thank you.
Rob?
Well, I too think the change of leadership is one of the top priorities, and both with the new finance director and the new superintendent, that will be a priority. Yes, we're facing budget challenges as other school districts are. I think we've weathered those much better than other school districts, but that will continue to be a challenge. But I think the real issue from my perspective is that I feel like the Hazlet Public Schools are positioned to be really in the top tier of schools, and that we can't let change in leadership and budget problems keep us from staying on track and getting to that top tier level. There's no reason that the Hazlet schools can't be there. I feel like we're well positioned, and really my priority would be to try to make that, to continue that progress towards being a top tier school.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, I hate to beat the same issues, but I agree on a couple of these. The budget obviously is the biggest issue facing this district and every district around the state. And obviously the new board, superintendent, and finance director meshing their styles together with the current administration and the parents in the district is really the biggest issue. A couple other ones, I think, obviously schools of choice is an issue, how we're going to manage that when in this new era of competition for students. Then also the new preschool program that we're coming on board, how are we going to monitor and evaluate that program and make sure that is running well. Overall, I think obviously there's a lot of tough issues, but the key to all of it will be obviously working together and communicating effectively with parents.
Thank you. Second question, please.
Okay, question 2. If you had a friend with school-age children who tells you they are looking to buy a house in a new school district and asks you about the Hazlet School District, what would you tell them?
Dave Hamilton?
Well, this isn't an academic question because we do talk about the Hazlet schools with people. And the number one thing we say is that parents are involved, especially in the elementary schools. We say that the teachers are skilled and dedicated. We say that the administration listens to parents. The district welcomes parental involvement. And that there's solid academic programs here. There are excellent extracurricular programs here. And my wife and I are very pleased with the education our children have received here.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, this is also not hypothetical for me. I've both lived this and done this. That is, my wife and I chose Hazlet first, and then we figured out which house we were going to buy. And so we literally bought into Hazlet school system before we bought into a neighborhood. But we've also had friends who have moved here, and I think the thing I would say to them, and have said to them, is Hazlet will compare well on all of the tangible measures of school systems, and you can get quickly to a short list, but I think the intangible things to look at, parental involvement is certainly one of those. I don't know how exactly to say this, but it is a sense of community in Hazlet that I think you simply don't find in other places. I point to things like the East Lansing Hazlet football game, when there are more Hazlet people there than there are East Lansing away. And I don't know exactly how to say that, but it seems to me that that's an awful special thing that we have here that a lot of other school districts don't, and it's community.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, I get this question quite a bit, obviously being a realtor in the area, and a couple things that I usually mention. I think what Hazlet offers is a well-rounded education. If you look at the choir programs, the fine arts, athletics, TV 25, some of those products that we have, I think that just gives a well-rounded student. I think historically the board and the administrators have worked well together. I think we see some problems in other areas with that. And as Rob mentioned, this community does have a small community feel, but the school system does offer all of the programs that a bigger city would offer. And last but not least, I think most parents are very heavily involved in the school system. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Bev?
Thank you. Well, this is a question I've had quite a few times over the years because of my involvement in various organizations as a volunteer, but it's a really very easy one to answer. Initially, I would say that the people in Hazlet listen. The teachers listen, the administration listens. If you want to go in and talk to somebody about your kids, you're going to find somebody that wants to hear it and wants to do something about whatever problem you have. The other thing that we have is, and I think that, Rob touched on this very well, it's a sense of community. When we have an event in Hazlet, there are so many cars, we can't figure out what to do with them all, even though we've added on to all of our parking lots. And that's a very special community activity, I think. Years ago, my daughter wrote something for a school project, and she wrote about how her neighborhood and her school were like things she saw on TV, where everybody knows each other and keeps track of everybody. And it's just a very special thing we have here in Hazlet.
Thank you. Third question, please.
What do you think about No Child Left Behind?
Rob, you get to be first.
Well, I don't know what you can say about No Child Left Behind in 1 minute, but let me start. I don't know anybody who's really opposed to the purpose of No Child Left Behind, that to literally leave no child unattended. I think it is. I think it has happened in America. I think we've given up on some kids, and I don't. I think it's in some ways a necessary law, but I don't think that happens in suburban school systems. I think that's an urban problem or a poor South problem. So I mean, while you can't be against the purpose of No Child Left Behind, I think it's going to probably end up being a serious case of unintended consequences. And I think I don't see it being undone in any significant way, and I think the challenge with No Child Left Behind will be to figure out how to survive in it, how to thrive in this system, and it has some potential to bring new funding. That hasn't happened yet, but it has that potential.
Thank you. Dave Turner?
Well, as Rob said, I think everyone agrees with the ideals behind the statute. We don't want to see any kids fall between the cracks. I think parents want to see progress with their schools, make sure that there's assessments that are working. But the bottom line to the statute is, that while there is good intentions, really what works is parental involvement and committed teachers and committed administrators, and we have that in Hazlet. So I guess overall I don't think it's going to have a big effect on Hazlet as it would as other districts.
Thank you. Bev?
This is certainly I agree, it's a great idea. I think that it can be a very positive movement within our country. I am concerned about whether the funding is going to be there, but I think that it's important that it holds schools accountable for the kids that aren't being served. One of the interesting things in Michigan is because we have our MEEP tests that were designed to be a very difficult test. This is not a minimum competency test. That is how we grade ourselves on how well we've done and how well we've reached each child. And it's something for us to be proud of, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to survive the difficulty of measuring all of our kids by those standards. But I think it can be very positive. It makes the schools identify who their special needs populations are, not just special ed kids, but kids that are minorities or come from low-income areas, and it really doesn't eliminate that from any school district. Everyone has to do it. It will also cause a little bit of turmoil because some of our teachers will have to get certifications that they didn't have to get prior to when they first started teaching. So that'll be some changes that will be made, but I think we'll be able to weather it well, and I'm kind of proud of the fact that our country is doing that. I don't think other countries, when they measure their kids with their testing, they don't measure the entire population, and we do.
Thank you. Dave Hamilton?
There are many good ideas behind No Child Left Behind, which I support, but I'm troubled by bringing federal bureaucracy into our schools. The good ideas that I think are strong, there's a strong emphasis on reading, especially at very young ages, and making sure that every child is up to grade level. Setting standards for children and standards for the schools is very good. Measuring performance is very good. Publicizing the results so everybody knows where your school stands is very good. And recognizing the importance of continuously improving your school systems is very good. But, in fact, Michigan has been on this road for a long time, and we really gain nothing by the federal law. In fact, I think there are problems associated with it. While the federal law didn't change what we're doing in Hazlet, it does add more reporting and more administrative burden for our schools. Michigan has high standards, and in one sense, we're penalized by that. We lose flexibility, we're threatened by actions if we don't make adequate yearly progress, which is very different from our schools than it may be for others. And we lose flexibility in how we address our problems, or our school system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
As a board member, how would you go about building consensus when an issue arises where board members have significant differences of opinion?
Okay.
Do you want me to read it again if it's
Please.
one you guys haven't seen? As a board member, how would you go about building consensus when an issue arises where board members have a significant difference of opinion?
Dave Turner?
I guess, I've come to the board meetings for the last few months and have seen the board in action. I haven't seen that happen historically, I guess, with our board that I've seen with other boards. I guess, I think with any board with different people and different ideas, you basically have to talk through the issues. I mean, there's no way to get around it. You have to talk through the issues, spend extra time, maybe meeting after meetings or meeting with administrators during the day, whatever it takes to get all the problems resolved. I think basically that's the way you get through there.
Thank you. Bev?
It's not really something that a board member would typically encounter. One of the first things that someone needs to learn as a new board member is that the board acts as a group. It doesn't act as individuals. And I think we've been very successful at that in Hazlet, which is one reason why things have gone so well. So it isn't really a matter of one board member coming with an idea and trying to talk everybody else into it. It's more a matter of the administration presenting an idea, or the staff, and it's through education that you actually bring people on board to what you want to accomplish.
Thank you. Dave Hamilton?
I've had a lot of experience trying to build consensus among groups that have wide-ranging opinions. I think fortunately the Hazlet Board hasn't been one of those groups. But I think that the way you reach consensus is to get all the information on the table, get all the opinions on the table, and then try to work towards the interests that each party has. So that as you talk through the issues, as you understand each party's interests, you can look for the areas of common ground and build a strategy that moves you towards consensus.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, this is in many ways what I do for a living. I work through committees and boards and organizations, and I think fundamentally is people of good intentions will find consensus if they remain open-minded and keep their ears open to conversation and good process. And I think again, being somebody of good intention and remaining open to ideas are the ways you get through consensus.
Thank you. Next question, please.
How many board meetings have you attended since you decided to run for election? And how many of the interviews for superintendent did you attend or view on TV 25?
Bev?
Gee, this is a tough question.
I don't know if this is a fair question.
I know, I'm not thinking this is fair. All of them, plus I've watched, I have to admit, I've watched even the interviews on Channel 25 on numerous occasions, so I confess.
Okay. Dave?
I've been to one of the board meetings and been following it very closely in the minutes, which I've received all the years that we've been involved in the Hazlet school system.
Rob?
I've been to one of the board meetings. I sat through an all-day or nearly all-day board retreat, hoping that I could be inconspicuous, but as the only non-board member in the room, it was difficult to be inconspicuous. And I have not watched many of the interviews, nor have I attended them.
Dave?
I've been doing probably most of the board meetings since around January, when I started thinking about, maybe before that, December. So I've been most of the meetings. In terms of the interviews, I have not attended them. I have watched, I'd say 3 or 4 of them on TV 25.
Thank you. Next question.
If a school district employee calls you with a problem or concern, how would you respond?
Dave?
Well, I think the first thing is to listen to what they have to say, but also ask them why they haven't talked to administration, because the superintendent and the building principals are really the people that we've hired to handle those problems. So I think that's the first place they need to go. If there's something that can't be resolved, then maybe it's something the board needs to look at, but the board works through the administration.
Rob?
I alluded to this earlier, but in my job, I have a board, and I have a fairly clear understanding of the differences between board work and staff work. And I believe that if an employee of the school system came and they had a problem, I'd punt, if you will, back to the administration, that those are administrative issues, not board issues.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, I guess, I would agree. I think if an employee did come with a problem, I think that overall, the board obviously is not to get involved in those day-to-day issues. That's for the administration to do, and I think the board's role is different from that. So I think you'd still listen, but I think you would refer them back to the administrator.
Bev?
I think we're all in agreement on this. The first thing is that someone needs to be referred back to their immediate supervisor or principal or whoever. But I would encourage them that if they don't get the result that they're looking for, that they are, they can keep moving up the ladder. But sometimes people, and I've had this happen over the years, sometimes people call and they really just want to make sure that they've talked to a board member about something, and they're really not necessarily trying to get a complaint going or anything like that. They just really want to know that they've been heard. So you do listen.
Thank you. Just a reminder to the audience, if you do have a question that you would like to have asked, feel free to fill out one of the yellow cards. Maybe one of the responses would stimulate a question. Feel free. We don't want to run out of questions. So, next question.
What could the board, as a group or as an individual board member, do to address school funding and other educational issues that are legislated at the state level and have a negative impact on Hazlet schools?
Okay. Rob?
Well, I think understanding the issues that are related to state budgeting and understanding the issues that are related to school funding formula is a good place to start. I do think that education's been held in a pretty safe place in some ways, that is relative to other things in the state budget, continues to be held, although it has received its fair share of cuts. I think it is protected at least by both the governor and the leaders of the other two parties, or the other party. That said, I think we have to continue to make our case as a school system to be active and involved and politically involved, because there's precious little we can do at the local level on state funding.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, I guess I don't know the whole background of how the boards work with association, but I know there is a Michigan Association of School Boards, and I believe there's probably legislative people there, and I think we would primarily work through that group to ensure that our interests are held in light of the funding. I don't know if there's really anything else on a local level we could do to affect that.
Bev?
Well, I think number one, as a citizen, I would call my legislator, because you can call them directly, and I have certainly done that over the years many times. As a new board member, I attended Michigan Association of School Board conferences and classes and received my certified board member designation. I earned it by working towards that. And going to those kinds of conferences is when you get that kind of information and you find out other people that you can contact, and you get a little bit better view of how some of the lobbying groups work.
Thank you. Next question. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. I knew I'd do that sooner or later.
Okay, there are professional groups for school boards and for superintendents that work together on behalf of all the school districts in Michigan, and they do work directly with the legislature through lobbyists. And so if it's really a big issue, that's a very good way to address it. The school board, either as individuals or as a school board, can also make contact with our legislators. Legislators will frequently want to hear from the school boards on something that affects schools, so I think we would be very active in doing that.
We're back to Rob, so that means next question.
Okay, we got one from the audience, so. With all the new teachers in the district, how will you help to make decisions so that they can continue to be successful?
Dave?
I think the board's role really is to support the administration and teaching staff, new teachers and more seasoned teachers. I think you have to be involved with individual schools, the principals, through the administration to ensure that they feel welcome and feel like they're part of the team. I think that's the board's role basically, is to support all the teachers and make sure that we're working together. And obviously our common interest is to make sure that the students have a great education here in Hazlet.
Bev?
Well, one of the things that we started a few years ago was having an evening when new teachers, after part of their orientation, would be able to have a dinner with the board, and we could speak to them individually, so we've certainly been doing that. I think probably the primary thing that a board member can do to assist new teachers, and really any teacher, is just to try to make sure that they have the tools that they need in order to deliver the superior education that I think our children are getting here in Hazlet.
Thank you. Dave?
I think one of the things that we want to do in Hazlet is to hire the best possible people and then challenge them to achieve excellence as they teach our children. And I think that the tone for that is set at the school board, and certainly the administration carries that. Then I think it's important for principals and teachers to mentor new teachers. That coming out of school in Michigan is good because they have a year of experience to get their finish their teaching degree. But I think ongoing mentoring from experienced teachers and from the principals is critical, and again, I think the school board can help set that tone.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, the disadvantage of going last is trying to find something original to say, I guess. I do think it's a resource question. The administration's job is to do the day-to-day sort of management and support, but I do think the board's role would be to make sure that the resources are there. And I think in any direct interaction with new board members or new teachers from the board certainly would be a good way to develop communication and show support more tangibly.
Thank you. Next question.
What do you see as the role of the school board as a group and you as an individual member?
Bev?
The role of the school board in Michigan is that, number one, we hire the superintendent, and we set the policy that the district follows. And then from a day-to-day basis, we review things and try to give as much of our opinion as representatives of the community as we can on the various issues that come before the board.
Dave?
I think the role of the school board is to set the overall policy for the district. It's a legal mandate. The school board is legally responsible for performing that. And the school board does work through the administration. Individual school board members, I think, need to be a little careful because the school board does work as a body, and so it's a little risky to try to get out as an individual. But I think every school board member is representing the public and brings that public perspective into the school in the policy decision-making.
Rob?
I think the role of the school board, like the role of nearly any board, is to set policy and to hire the superintendent or the chief executive. And then within broad parameters to make certain things are on track, not to manage, but to direct. And I think probably in a school board environment to give legitimacy in some ways to the decisions of the school district. It is the elected body. It's the body that brings the community to the table, and I think in that sense gives some legitimacy to the decisions of the district.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, I think the role of the board is obviously oversight, and more important than that is the representation of the parents and students in the district. And even more important than that is to be in a support role for the administrators and teachers and ensure they have everything they need to give the best education possible for our students.
Thank you. Next question, please.
What kind of experience do you have with collective bargaining?
Dave?
I have 3 unions that I work with, and there's quite a few unions in the state. We became unionized a little over 20 years ago, so I have a lot of experience in dealing with a unionized workforce. And it'll be a new experience being on the board because we'll have to actually ratify the collective bargaining agreements. So I think it's going to be important that we bring in the public perspective and make sure that the elements that are in the contract are really in the public interest.
Rob?
Well, I have 2 children, and I've done a lot of bargaining. I don't know how collective it was, but as you might imagine, having worked with small business an awful lot, I don't have a lot of experience in collective bargaining. I will say that, again, having been involved in sort of the public policy arena, I have a fair understanding of the issues themselves, but not from the perspective of the bargaining table, but from the perspective of state policy making.
Dave?
Well, in terms of direct negotiations, obviously I have no experience with that, although I think I have a unique perspective since my wife is a teacher, not in this district, but in another district. So I do have the ability to see both sides of the table, and I think that would help quite a bit in the role as a board member.
Thank you. Bev?
I was asked this question by the teachers union 12 years ago when I was first running for the board, and the only answer that I had to it was that my dad was a Teamster. So it didn't really have a lot in the whole collective bargaining, but of course in the last 12 years as a board member have been somewhat involved, but not really directly, because that is something that the administration does. And I think that we're really fortunate in Hazlet that we have an excellent relationship with our staff, and all the way down the line in every staff group. And that's probably the main reason that we have such a cohesive community and we have been so successful.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Okay, this is a question from the audience. If there were one area, subject, or idea that you disagree with the Hazlet board, what would it be?
Rob?
Well, I guess nothing jumps right to my mind, but I can go back a little bit to which, in many ways, is what got me involved in the first place, and it was issues related to safety, building safety, as you know, Bob. You know, the issues of whether or not we lock the doors on the buildings and those sort of things. That's an issue that I had a strong interest in, got involved, and I'm really pleased that through good process, what those results have been. And I think some really positive policy changes have been made and some really positive physical changes have been made as a result.
Thank you. Dave?
You know, I can't think of anything in particular that I have a problem with the board. I guess my first thought that came to my mind was, and this is nothing the board's done, or I kind of feel like that there should be more representation of parents that have students either in the system or coming into the system coming up. And this is not a knock on the board. All the members have given a great deal of service. I just think there needs to be a little more representation there.
Thank you. Bev?
Well, it's a tough question for me. About the only thing I think I've typically disagreed with the board in is that one of the people we interviewed last week I would have preferred not to have interviewed. But that's okay. And you can all take that wherever you want. But otherwise, being a member of the board, I'm pretty pleased with the way the board is done. I think that our board tries to be as representative of our community as possible.
Thank you. Dave?
I don't think there's anything that I strongly disagree with, but I do think there's room for improvement. And that's in the area of parental involvement. And while Hazlet does a very good job of bringing parents in, a couple of years ago I was surprised as an involved parent when I found out this new social studies curriculum kind of just showed up. And I raised the issue in HCC, and a small group of us got together as a subcommittee to work out a procedure to allow parents to be more involved in this curriculum process. And as part of that group, what we came up with is that there were at least 3 points where parents could be involved so that they would know what's going on with the curriculum, have a chance to have input before a final decision is made. And every time I hear something new on HCC, I kind of ask myself, how have parents been involved? And that's the same kind of question I'll take to the school board.
Thank you. Next question.
Another one from the audience. How do you view the role of fine arts within the elementary and secondary curriculum?
Dave?
Boy, tough question. I think it's vital, obviously, in elementary school to get the kids. I think it helps, obviously, with the fine motor skills and helps those kids move along. I guess in the secondary grades, I think it's more of a voluntary type thing. I would encourage, obviously, all kids to try it and move on, whatever their skills may be, whether it's athletics or fine arts or other programs. I think, as a board, we need to support the district and have all those programs available to the students.
Thank you. Bev?
Well, I think it's essential. I think that data has shown that children that are exposed at an early age to fine arts do better in just about every area. As a parent, I had the choir child, I had the child that was good in art, I had all of those various experiences, and I also was an art major in college, which gives you the ability to do absolutely nothing when you get done, but but you're really, really good at art. But I think it's really an important part of school. I don't mean to make jest of that, but.
Thank you. Dave?
It's important for children to have a good, strong education in fine arts. It helps make an individual well-rounded, help understand the environment and the community that they live in. And I think Hazlet does a good job with our choir, with our theater. Many of our young people have excellent experience in the fine arts, and I certainly want to see that continue.
Thank you. Rob?
I was at a meeting last week where Richard Florida spoke, the sort of author of Cool Cities, and he makes a very compelling case that you can't be a cool city if you don't pay attention to the arts, and I think that certainly starts in the school system. The question is always balance. Do we crowd out basic academics? What is the right balance between fundamental learning and fine arts? And while we seem to be doing something right, we're producing very talented kids in our fine arts programs and who are academically sound.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Question from the audience. What would you look for in hiring, it's very apropos now, in hiring a new superintendent?
Bev?
Oh, gee, I hadn't thought about it.
Right.
Probably the most important thing is a good fit. We have a culture in Hazlet that I think is important to maintain, one that has been very positive for us as a community and for our children and for the people that live and work here. And so I think that's probably the number one qualification, is that they be a good fit for Hazlet. In addition to that, I'd like to see somebody with vision and with the ability to draw in the community and take part in continuing to have as good a relationship as we do with our employees and our community.
Thank you. Dave?
I think it'll be essential for the new superintendent to have excellent communication skills, to work with the community and with the teachers and staff. The superintendent should have vision and should be a very solid strategic thinker, to look long-term, what's happening in the political environment, what's happening financially, what's going on in the educational world. And I think it's very important for the superintendent to build even stronger partnerships with teachers and parents than we have even now. I think that's critical for the long-term health of our school system.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I think this is a very, very difficult position because so much is expected of it. And I think fit with Hazlet is probably the main issue. And I'm not sure I know how to define that, Bev. You certainly have a better position from which to define it. I'm glad you're making that decision and not the other three of us sitting here. But truthfully, it's a position that, I think so much is expected of it. We expect a visionary, we expect a terrific manager, we expect someone who can, nearly walk on water in many, many places, and I wish well those who are making that decision.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, obviously, I agree that we need a good community person, a good communicator, a good manager. I think, a lot of these candidates all have that. But I think the most important thing is a person that's willing to try new ideas that haven't been traditionally done in schools. And I think one of those right now that we're doing, the program with MSU over at Wilkshire, is one of those. But I think the person needs to think outside of what the traditional role of schools have been and try to build partnerships with businesses and improve our district from that.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Another one from the audience. Many of our voters are senior citizens. What would you do to promote their support of Hazlet schools?
Dave?
Hold a candidates forum and put it on Channel 25. I think that reaching out to all of our citizens is important. And I think the senior citizens is just one element of our community. I think we need to reach out to everyone. And I think one of the things that could be very helpful is to give senior citizens more opportunity to come into the schools. There's some schools that have programs that kind of bring in senior citizens to kind of be grandparents for some of the children. And maybe some of the tutoring or some of the relationships that could be built up between our children and some senior citizens could be very beneficial for everyone.
Thank you. Rob?
I think we really can't let seniors or anybody else who doesn't have kids in the school system believe that they don't have a stake in the quality of education here. And I think that stake is that quality school systems draw people and draw commerce, they draw community. And you really can't have a thriving community without a quality education system. It can be brought down as simply as property value, that are people coming in or leaving, and what is the role of the school in that, are they coming or going question. So I think we all have a stake in it.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, Robbie Stolman. As a realtor, obviously, senior citizens that own homes, I think we do have to communicate better with them, make them understand how their home values are tied to how good the school systems are. And also, I think, we have to encourage more volunteer actions between our schools and the senior citizen centers around the area.
Beth?
Well, one of my favorite things that we did in the 12 years that I've been on the board is to come up with the HIP card, which is the Hazlet Important Person, and it allows any senior citizen who's a resident of Hazlet to attend any Hazlet activity for free. And that includes classes, that's the plays, that's everything. Also, the high school play has usually a night, I think it's like Thursday night, where they actually bus some senior citizens over and they have a dinner and then they get to go to the play. We have grandparents volunteering at Meridian High School in the child care area. And, also another big thing for senior citizens, I think, will be the pool that we're building over at the high school. It's going to be handicap accessible. And, we try to do as many of those kind of things as possible because a large percentage of our community, especially our voters, are senior citizens. And it's important that they have that sense of ownership.
Thank you. Next question, please.
What is your position on MEEP testing? Should schools continue using it or change to the ACT or some other standardized test?
Rob?
Well, I know this is a big controversy. I know that the legislature is seriously considering dumping the MEEP and going to the ACT. I can tell, I honestly don't believe I'm qualified to answer this question, that I know enough to know the detailed differences. I know MEEP has been held out as a sort of model testing regimen for states, and now our own state is sort of turned against it. So I'm a little at a loss to understand why.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Well, obviously, I'm not an expert on the MEEP test either, and the kids have gone through that. But I guess, from some of the meetings I attended, I did hear quite a bit that now that the funding, the merit scholarship is gone, there's not a lot of incentive for the kids to take the test, and some of them may take the test and just fill it out and send it in, so then you have a problem with how Hazlet scores compare and that sort of thing. Obviously, the ACT is tied to college entrance, and so I think it would probably be a good idea to do that. And again, I don't feel as qualified to answer the whole entire question, but I think we do have a problem in our district, and probably with other districts, with the MEP and getting kids to take the test.
Thank you. Bev?
Well, I'll probably get stoned for saying this, but I think the MEP tests have really improved education in Michigan. And they certainly are not without their flaws, and certainly not without their need for some fine tuning. But by picking a vehicle that is what we want kids to walk out of school learning, rather than the minimum that they can get out of their 13 years in school, it seems to me like a very important thing to maintain, but perhaps make changes to. But I'm kind of proud of the fact that Michigan has one of the most difficult tests in the nation that we use for our testing our schools. And it causes us as educators to look at things more closely and try to make sure that we are teaching the right thing.
Thank you. Dave?
In the Hazlet Coordinating Council, we've spent a lot of time looking at MEP scores and evaluating what it means. And I think that MEP is very important. It was specifically designed to evaluate how successful our children are doing on the curriculum that was set up for Michigan students. The ACT is designed for an entirely different purpose. I think accountability is one of the issues I said is really critical for our district in the long run. I think MEP is designed to help make sure school districts are accountable for results, and I think we should stick with it.
Thank you. Our final question.
You've all described how you represent the community in what capacity you've done that. How would you continue to represent the community on the board as a board member?
Dave?
I guess, I would make myself available to members of the community and try to reach out to as many people as I can, especially with the young kids coming in the system such as I have, and get them involved. I think, obviously, as I said before, the biggest thing we have going for us in Hazlet, and what we need to continue, is to have more parents involved, not only at the young age, but as they go through high school.
Thank you. Bev?
Well, I think it's important to stay as connected as you can. Sometimes it's difficult for everybody because we all have demands on our time. As I said earlier, my husband and I have built 4 houses here in Hazlet, so we've got a lot of different neighbors that we can talk to that we've had over the years. And you have to try to be at school activities as much as possible. I think that in the upcoming year or two that we're going to probably, as a board, need to be more involved because we'll have a new superintendent and we'll have, people that really need a little bit more guidance than what we've enjoyed before because we've had 14 years with the same person. But I think primarily you just have to talk to staff. You have to go out of your way to ask people questions and talk to your neighbors and talk to people you see in the grocery store and whatever, and that's what I have done over the last 12 years.
Thank you. Dave?
I think it's critical for board members to stay in touch with the community, to talk to people, to ask them what their thoughts are. And I expect as a board member that there are people that will be glad to volunteer their opinions, and I think that's a very good thing. I really admire Charlie Brenneman and the job that he did in attending PTOs well past the years where his children were in the schools. And I think the PTOs are really an excellent place for a board member to be in touch with the active, involved, concerned parents. And I'm going to be involved in PTOs for a long time.
Thank you. Rob?
I want you to see that I wrote down Charlie Brenneman right here.
I have to say that I have to remind you.
I'm not stealing your answer. I was there too.
Good, that's very good.
I've admired Charlie, his involvement in schools, and I think just being around and being there at the events and in the buildings is an important part of it. I would also just sort of pour myself into understanding the issues, and I think part of it, if I've made anything clear, is that I'm not an expert in some of these issues, and I would make a determination to simply do what is necessary to come up to speed on those issues.
Okay. We will now have a closing statement by each candidate. Due to the time, if we could keep it closer maybe to 30 seconds than a minute, but we will allow the minute because that's what we promised. Since we started in reverse alphabetical order at the beginning, we'll start in the regular alphabetical order for the closing. Rob?
Well, I want to thank the PTO. This is a good forum and format. I don't know that I'm any more qualified. I don't know that I'm necessarily any more motivated than others at this table. I can tell you that I would, in fact, pour myself into it. I can tell you that I would be in the buildings. I would be at the events. I will be in the buildings, and I will be at the events, whether I'm elected or not. I came from a school that says you don't leave the sales pitch without asking for the sale, so I would appreciate your support, and I would do anything I can to earn it.
Thank you. Dave?
The last few days, I've attended a number of open houses of recent high school graduates. The sense of pride and accomplishment that I've seen on the faces of those young people and their parents is just very impressive. It's incredible the role that the schools play in our community. And as parents, we're allowing the schools to be our partners as we invest in our children. And I think that the school board is entrusted with a great responsibility for this community. And I'd like to thank the PTOs for having this forum. I think it's been excellent. And I thank you for watching, and those of you that have attended, that this shows a high degree of involvement on your part and dedication on your part. But I'd also like to ask you to take the next step, to choose the person that will best represent you, has the experience and what is needed on the Hazlet School Board, and please vote next Monday.
Thank you. Bev?
Well, I'd also like to thank Bob and the PTOs for putting this on. It's a wonderful way for people to become informed. And I also would like to ask for your vote. I feel that I have been a contributor to the school board in the last 12 years, and I would like another 4 years of doing that. And I think I will be a very positive influence on the direction of Hazlet. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave?
I just overall want to say I appreciate the efforts of the board today and our administrators and teachers, especially our outgoing administrators. I hope that everyone gets out and votes, regardless of who you vote for. I just want to encourage all the parents to be involved in their children's education.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the viewers on television, the members of the audience for your participation. I'd like to thank the presidents of the PTO, Chris and Melissa and Millie. And I'd also like to thank the candidates for taking the time to spend a little bit of your time with us this evening and answering our questions. Thank you very much. We're going to have a short 30-minute reception following. If you'd like to stay for coffee, cookies, punch, and mingle and talk with the candidates, please feel free. Thank you.